Hello, friends. Welcome. Thank you for joining me. I wanted to take some time today to go over some thoughts that I have around and some of my experiences in quitting smoking. I quit smoking cigarettes probably about 3 years ago, and it was a very interesting experience for me. Um, of course, it's very difficult to do, especially to start. Um, I'd tried to quit a number of times before that, and I'd smoked probably, well, it got to the point where it was going to be about, it was 15 or 16 years, and I realized that if I smoked anymore, it was going to be over half of my life. And that was going to be a problem for me. So I got to a point where I was ready to do it. And a number of times that I tried before, I had a million different reasons why it didn't work, and that's just how it is sometimes. Either you're not ready, or the stuff going on in your life is going to be that much more prohibitive um, from giving you the peace of mind to work with, where you can actually be in control of the cravings for cigarettes that are going to come. Um, that you've been used to for so many years and that aren't going to stop just because you stop. So I didn't do it first thing in the morning. I found timing to be an extremely important aspect to it. Um, I stopped around 11:30. I think it was 11:20 um, a.m. So I had gotten up in the morning and done my normal morning routine, cigarettes and coffee and breakfast, driving to work, cigarette before work, and maybe a cigarette break or two before then. I was probably keeping it lower, being that I had my plans to actually quit. So I wasn't chain smoking up until 11, but I didn't neglect my cravings during the mornings. But once I got to that half day point, at that point, once I quit, I only had half of the day to go before going to sleep, which is a much larger, a much better um, distance to look ahead when you're quitting smoking. Looking ahead, saying, like, oh, I've got to deal with half a day and then I can go to sleep. And then once I wake up, that'll be another 8 hours on top of that half a day. That'll be almost a whole day that I'm done. So, in my experience with quitting, I found a lot of things that I really didn't expect. And one was the sort of um, the psychological aspect of it. The There's certain physiological aspects going on, changes happening in my brain um, as I refrained from smoking. I started feeling things very differently. Um, to me, it was almost psychedelic, very much so, actually. Um, when I would listen to music on the radio, I happened to be hearing a lot more music that would nearly bring me to tears. Um, this isn't something that was real common for me, generally speaking, throughout my life. That it was pretty uncommon. Like, I would hear a song that sounded really good and get like goosebumps or something like that, and I could listen to an emotional song and feel a way about it. But after quitting smoking, it got to the point where I would hear a note played on a synthesizer or a guitar, or a tone of someone singing, and I would just feel a rush, a wave of emotive feeling. Not emotive like, oh, I feel so happy, or I feel afraid. It wasn't or angry. It wasn't emotions with like thoughts tied to them. It was just feeling. Um, my body was going through. Well, my brain was releasing chemicals that would flood through my body, and I could feel just very intense sensations. Um, and sometimes those sensations were enough to bring me to tears. And all of that could be brought on from something as simple as a sound on the radio, or the colors of light that I was seeing, or, a beautiful scene in the morning. Um, all those things that normally can make you feel ways were making me feel just extreme intense sensations. And the more that I experienced these things, the more I realized that I was experiencing the feelings that are generally translated into emotions, but in a way that I'd never experienced them before. So I ended up discovering through that I had been regulating my emotional experiences for years, potentially up to half of my life prior to that, by smoking, which opened me up to kind of like question, had I really experienced my life up to that point in the way that a well emotionally regulated person would have. And I honestly don't think that I had. In abstaining from nicotine, I began to experience the physiological sensations brought on by stimuli to my brain that eventually become that the next step of which would be to experience those things as emotions, or to apply a feeling to them, um, once the interpretation of that feeling gets back to the brain. I had never felt any of those feelings before. If I had, they had been at a much lesser extent, and I was mesmerized by this. Like, I was just having a hell of a time experiencing all of these things. That's why I say it's so psychedelic, um, where anything at a moment's notice could trip my brain up to release these chemicals. I believe is what was going on to have my body experience such intense feelings that at the end of that I could then interpret as, you know, feeling content or upset or stressed out. And the surprising thing, there wasn't a lot of stressful feelings being released, even though I was quitting something, that was extremely difficult to do and somewhat stress inducing. I was just so excited by the experience of these things that I wasn't that stressed about it. I was experiencing something new. And it seems to me that through that experience that I was using nicotine as a placeholder for emotional experience throughout a lot of my life. Imagine, like, say you're stressed out at work and you have a cigarette, and that takes care of that problem. I mean, it doesn't fix the stressful situation at work, but you have an input of, oh, I'm stressed. And then you have a cigarette, and that calms down that feeling for a moment. So you don't really go deep into it. You have a tick, and you check it with a cigarette. Then say, um, you know, you feel full after a meal. You're like, I feel good. I feel rested. I'm going to have a cigarette. You feel good. It creates a tick, and you check it with a cigarette. And, say you're bored and, you haven't got anything really you could think of to do. And then that feeling there, you can check it with a cigarette. And each of these things, they come in as a problem and leave with the same solution. So by taking out that solution, the cigarette, it leaves you to deal with that input in a different way for a longer period of time, and on the whole, a more fulfilling way, because obviously we're programmed to take in the data of an emotion. We have emotions for a reason. If our logical mind works on the rational things, and our emotive mind works on the things that we don't deal too well with reason. And by using a cigarette or any addictive mechanism on a regular basis whenever you have a problem, you're sort of shortchanging yourself from the possibilities of the experiences and what you can really get at the end of fully experiencing those emotions. which I think is, when you experience an emotion more fully, you can respond to it more fully, or you can understand it. You'll take a little deeper probe into that feeling and integrate that feeling more into your person, into who you are, into what it is you're dealing with at any given moment, than if you just rely on the addictive behavior, which cuts off the feeling. This sort of hyper focus that I had on realization of new sort of emotional integration was very, very strong during the first month or two after quitting. Eventually integrated into myself new ways of dealing with those sorts of emotions to where it didn't take such a heavy physiological toll. Um, but it still it still remains it still remains today, but not in such a bizarre way as I'd first experienced it after having emotionally regulated with cigarettes for 16, 17. And on the whole, I feel much more well rounded as an emotional person than I did prior to quitting smoking. Anyway, I hope this helped someone out there. It's something that I found extremely interesting, and I wanted to get out there before it had been too many years and I'd forgotten more of what it felt like. Um, so, yeah, hope this helps. I'm going to put a little zoom in on that horrible sign that I made probably 12 or 14 years ago for a party I was in. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. No smoking. Notice, smoking is prohibited at all times on board Mile High Club lavatories. Removing or tampering with detectors is generally frowned upon under penalty of pain. Doing so will result in supersaturated pussy furuncles in your nethers. Our guy in the CIA will reprogram you to permanently hear a looped 42-minute, brain-melting, smooth jazz solo. Hairy palms, anal leakage, and compulsive humping when your grandpa says soup are usually temporary.